I often say to people, start with chapter 2, because if you don't want to know the backstory of how I went from Delhi to Bombay, the real action begins in chapter 2. So if you're pressed for time, start with chapter 2. If you want real drama, go to chapter 3,
For sure.
etc.
Exactly. But I should take this opportunity to tell all of our viewers and listeners that they shouldn't skip chapter one, because the hook for the book, the first chapter, where your interactions with the Beatles of in the 1960s, is something that really sucks in the reader.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
and of course you've gone on record as saying that you are the biggest Beatles fan that there was in India at the time.
yeah,
So would you
absolutely.
absolutely, and would you mind just telling us a little bit, Kabirji, about your interaction with the Beatles and how that went about,
Yeah.
and what was the story behind that?
You see, the thing is, my parents were freedom fighters, and they were very idealistic people, wonderful people, did wonderful things, fought for great causes, the independence of the country, but they had no money. They which literally sacrificed their careers after being graduates of Oxford, just to fight for the freedom struggle. So they had very little money. So when I came, I got the marks to get into St. Stephen's College in Delhi, which was the best college probably in India at the time. But I didn't have the money to pay for it. So I had to freelance. So I freelanced with radio. And while freelancing with radio, and I was the biggest Beatles fan in the world, I heard the Beatles had come into town. I said, wow, how can I meet them? I'll go as an interviewer. So I went to my bosses, and they laughed at me when I said, I'll interview the Beatles. The whole Delhi press calls after them. What are you going to? I said, give me a shot. So anyway, I persuaded them to give me the microphone and the badge and the tape recorder. And I went to the hotel where they were staying, the Oberoi Intercontinental. All the press was swarming around, fans outside being kept behind barricades. And there was this frenzy of everyone looking for the Beatles. I knew I had to find Brian Epstein, the manager, and I knew what he looked like because I was a fan. So finally, I saw him after a 2-hour wait coming out of the elevator, going towards his car in the foyer, outside the foyer. And I went up to him and said, hello, sir, I'm Kabir Bedi, All India Radio. I'm from Government of India, Government All India Radio. It's the biggest radio station in the country. And the government have decided the Beatles are going to do an interview at 10 o'clock tonight. Said, what nonsense, the boy's not going to do any interview. I said, sir, the government have decided and announced it. It was a white lie, of course. But he was absolutely apoplectic. And he said, the boys will do no bloody interview. I will do the bloody interview. I said, yes, yes. For me, an interview with Brian Epstein was good enough. So when I went to his room to do the interview a few hours later, he opened the door in a state of great distress. He was sweating. He was obviously not well. And he opened the door and I said, Kabir Bedi, sir, All India Radio, interview tonight, sir. He said, now, the thing was, I'd persuaded him because I kept repeating the word government. He'd just gotten in a lot of trouble with the government in the Philippines. So I knew this was their point of vulnerability. So that's what really persuaded him to give me the interview. And when he looked at me, he said, oh, God, I can't do this. I thought, oh, God, I've lost it. He caught my arm, took me across the length of the floor to the suite at the other end where the Beatles were, and knocked on the door. And Paul McCartney opened the door and he says, boys, do me a favor, give this chap an interview. And I was in with the Beatles. So that was one of the, oh, wow experiences of my life, because I was not just with the greatest musicians on the planet, they were the symbols of the 1960s. They were symbols of the whole flower power revolution, the sexual revolution, the social revolution with people demonstrating for peace, the change of values from a very rigid militaristic view of things that society had to a more relaxed, more human, more cultural, more creative way of looking at life. And we were part of that revolution in India. So to see the Beatles there was just, wow. Now, what I said to the Beatles, what they said to me, that's in my book. You've got to read it. It's too long to go into. And the aftermath of that also is in the book. But it was which is why I started my book with it, because I thought that's something everyone can relate to everywhere in the world, the Beatles, and how a young cub reporter looking to meet them and looking to make his career found a way to meet them no matter what. And that was my opening chapter.